signals themselves that trigger an event are actually not weak themselves. In reality, it might be our inability to look at these information sources and to process them accordingly. I was part of Japan's first national investigative body of an accident. And this one, as we all know, is the Fukushima nuclear accident report. And obviously this troubles me because this is not just a Japan problem, but it also affects a lot of the world. And at the same time, it also affects me as a Japanese in that it's displaced about 250,000 people, and we have an uninhabitable area of about something the size of Luxembourg. So it's a quite serious problem. And what further compounds this issue is the fact that here is a country, Japan, that is known for its engineering skills, its adherence to process and such, and yet you would think that they could run a nuclear power plant correctly, but that wasn't the case. And so it was interesting to see that we were doing this investigation, and the operators are claiming that the signals were weak, that they couldn't anticipate some of the struggles that they would have. One of them was obviously the tsunami that hit the nuclear power plant, and they felt that that information wasn't really available. Yet, if you look at history and you look at some of the historical records of the tsunami, it was shown that that area was affected time and time again, even as early as the Dark Middle Ages of Europe. And so this information was available, and yet the signals in putting together things like generators and people missing this fact and ending up installing them in basements that could potentially get flooded was definitely a weak signal that was missed. And so in our report, one of the key findings that we mentioned, and this is also online and in English, is somewhat endemic of the Japanese culture, but quote unquote, our reflexive obedience, our reluctance to question authority, our devotion to sticking with the program, our groupism, and our insularity. We mentioned this, and this really led to really an exaggeration of the situation in Fukushima. Now, Japan doesn't own the copyright to this lack of reading signals. In fact, I'm looking at this whole groupism issue after this accident report's been issued, and it occurs well often in all parts of the world. So what usually happens after these types of accidents is the media, the newspaper will report this, and everybody will basically say, what happened? Anyone could have guessed this. Anyone could have figured out that it would probably be a stupid idea to put a generator in the basement. But what's interesting here is if you look at how communication is important, if you take the human body as an example, if, for example, my little toe has a very direct path to the brain, it doesn't matter that I'm giving a presentation at the World Economic Forum. If my toe itches, it will let me know. But if you take the converse to this and you have a CEO of a large corporation, the little toe would be afraid of being amputated and would not provide that signal up to the CEO. And so we have these failures in communications where we don't learn from these issues. I think that we're also highly involved in that direct messages and things. You know, when you put your finger near a flame and it's warm, you know to take it out. We're also very automated in that if we drink bad milk, we know that we will have a gag reflex. So these things as communications is very, very important. The problem here is we live in a generation here where society, organizations and such seek homogeneity. Obviously, if you're a manager, if you run an organization, it's easier to have people who agree with you, who share the same thoughts and visions that go the same direction. And I think that this has become really an Achilles heel in today's global competitive environment, especially when you have power operators that have 20,000 employees who think and hear and say the same thing. And so this is one of the big issues that I have. With a lot of the weak signals that we see in the world today. If you look at historically a lot of the weak signals, when I started this investigation, I read about 9,000 pages of other accident reports, and they all end up the same way. It's either the person who could not bother the captain during his dinner before an iceberg hits. It's about financial markets. It's about Sandy, about other natural disasters. And so if you look and dissect this, it all ends up that the signals were always there, that it was a function of actually transmitting them and getting them to the right people. And so I think that from our end, it's become that biologically we're very tuned to get these signals, but we have willfully begun to ignore how these signals get processed. And a lot of this, I think, has become that we're trying to get everybody to think the same way. But I want to really emphasize, and more important, going forward for a lot of these organizations, the concept of the importance of diversity. The way of how you think differently, how you bring in different ages, how you bring different genders, how you bring different people with different backgrounds, and to say things that may not be apparent to the other person. That if you don't, and you look back on history, what happens is that you end up realizing that these things were blindingly obvious. We have to have protocols here in an increasing complex world to allow for people to have this discussion and to address really the main topic of this year's forum, resilient dynamism. Thank you.